I think we're ready. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we got up to Chof Aleph Amud Beis. I'm going to go back a little bit just to just the beginning of the sugya, just to remind ourselves. So let's go from Omar Afuna, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down. Chof Aleph Amud Beis. Basically, the sugya is talking about how we, whether or not someone else can set up shop opposite you. That's the sugya, right? And we're going to discuss the differences between if you both occupy the same street, the mavui, you're the same part of the same area. What happens if it's a different mavui? What happens if he's a different town? Some stranger, a peddler is going to come in and start selling his wares. All these things are discussed through this sugya. The two main shittas that we're going to need to be aware of are Rav Huna and later on at the bottom of the Amud Rav Huna Braid Rav Yeshua, and you'll see how the Gemora develops this. Rav Huna says, Amar Rav Huna, Hai Bar Mavua. We did this last time, so we'll go over it. Amar Rav Huna, Hai Bar Mavua. What was that? Sorry, Chof Aleph Amud Beis. 12 lines down, or 13 lines down thereabouts. Yeah. So Rav Huna says, Hai Bar. You got it? Yeah. Omar Rav Huna, Hai Bar Mavua. So this bar mavua, someone lives in Mavui and he sets up a millstone, he's grinding mill, he's producing flour, and someone in the same Mavui, a neighbor, comes along and sets up as well. He can stop him, he can object. Because he can say to him, you're basically preventing my livelihood. I set up shop here, I was the one who established a mill. For you to go and establish a mill directly opposite me is going to disturb my trade. This is the Gemara. Let's say we can support this from a brayse. Or at least it doesn't say that it's a brayse. It's a statement. It seems to be a statement on Miroim. You distance the trap for the fish. You have to distance a trap from fish. The space that it the sort of the run that the fish has. And basically the story is that you already have someone who is a fisherman and he is established in a certain locality. He's put his trap, he knows where the fish are going to, the fish know where the trap is, everyone's set up nicely. You've got to make sure that you don't set up your your area that you want to fish in or set up your trap for fish in the same place. It's got to be, you got to stay away. The Parsa ways. That seems to be the same idea. Someone knows Shani Dogim, Diavi Sierra. Dogim and fish are different because once they've put their eye to a certain place where they see food, they see the bait, then that's where they go. So the idea is, Rashi says that it's like he already has them. It's so certain, it's like you can program the fish. They're definitely going to go in that day for only catching mice, to trap for rats, and they never take it, right? But if only it was the same thing with rats. But when it comes to fish, they're going to get the bait, and therefore it's as if he's already holding them, and that's called a mazik. That's a mazik, yeah, and that's why it's no proof for Rav Huna, right? Rav Huna, he hasn't got them yet. He hasn't got the customers. So the customers are now going to have two options. They're going to have so-and-so selling flour there and someone else selling flour across the street. That's not necessarily the same thing. And therefore, the Gemora says you can't bring a raya from that case of the fisherman, right?
There's only one guy in the novel doing grinding.
Right.
He's got a captive audience. He's going to go sing.
Right. So the way Rashi phrases it is, it's the end of Ramaschal Shani Dogim Yavis Yara. The last line he says, "Aval hocha misha bo etzli yovoy, misha bo etzlecha yovoy." Someone's coming to me is going to come. Someone's going to come to you is going to come. Just because you have set up a shop in a certain way doesn't mean that you have the claim on all of the potential customers.
Just think, Sharon's and then La Brioche.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. The truth is what's interesting here. What's interesting here is we're going to see. Hold on to that. The truth is, Yossi, if you hold on to the question in the sense that hold on to it as we go through the sugya, because one of the things we have to understand, and there's a ritva. I'll tell you a little bit of a ritva in Kiddushin, which explains this in a bit more detail. As we have to understand the difference between people who live in the same mavui, a neighbor, and someone who comes from a different mavui. It's a little bit counterintuitive. Is there more of a reason? Is it more logical to restrict someone else from a different mavui or from your own? Let's hold on to that and come back to it. So anyway, the Gemara says no, you can't prove anything from those. So let's try something else. Let's see Rav Huna goes Rabbi Yehuda in this Mishnah. This time Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. A shopkeeper can't distribute nuts and things like that and peels, that type of stuff, things they used to eat to children as a sort of incentive, because the children used to go and buy things from the shops, and to encourage them to come to him. And that's not fair. And that's not fair. The Chachomim say it's mutar. They say it's mutar. So this would seem to be, again, a straightforward proof for Rav Huna. Right? Rabbi Yehuda would seem to be a straightforward proof for Rav Huna. Why? Because at the end of the day, what are you doing? By giving out these treats to the kids, you're ensuring the trade only comes to you and doesn't go to someone else. So you're taking the trade away from other people. So that would be the argument that Rav Huna, it would seem, ostensibly, Rav Huna would make the same argument. That's why you can't set up shop next to the other guy, right? That's it. But the Chachomim Mamati says, well, no, it's not I feel the Tim Rabbanon. You can say the Rabbanon would agree in Rav Huna's case. Because I've kind of played on later review the Hosamela, the Amalea, not come flagino, I'm Gerziat, Plug Shivisky. What do you mean? I'm distributing nuts, and you can distribute something else, almonds, whatever. You can distribute something else. So I'm not restricting you, and we can both do this. Give out these incentive, these little treats. I will over here. I feel Rabbanon Modu. Even here, the Rabbanon might even the Rabbanon might agree to Rav Huna. Because you can say to him, you are restricting my trade. So basically, that's basically where we got up to last time. That effectively we suggested one possible proof. Rav Huna, we said that's not a proof. And then we had another brisa where we said, well, it seems like he was Rabbi Yehuda. And we said, no, actually, everyone might agree with Rav Huna. Because here, everyone might agree. You've got a straightforward restriction of trade, right? Straightforward restriction of trade. Everyone might agree that by setting up shop in the same street as the other guy, you're effectively limiting him. The Gemora says, though, we have a question of Bryce. It's not so simple. Rav Huna's din is not simple at all. Meisvei, the Bryce says, a person can open a shop next to his friend's shop. He can open a bathhouse next to his friend's bathhouse. And he can't object. He can't object. Because he can say, you're doing in your jurisdiction, I'm doing in my jurisdiction. To take Jeremy's example, La Brioche will say to whatever, who was it? Anyway, whatever you're doing here, one's going to see, well, they're each going to say to each other, right? I've got my bagels, you've got your bagels, Shalom Alisrael, right? That's what the Brisa says. And that seems to be a straightforward. Obviously, that's a straightforward difference. Obviously different to Rav Huna. This clearly is not like Rav Huna. So Gemora says that it's not a problem for Rav Huna because Tanoi, it's a machlokas Tanoim. Rav Huna is going to be like one of the Tanoim in this brisa. The sign in the brisa says, and this is the key. This is the key brisa in the sense this is the machlokas Tanoim on the issue. Kofim b'nei mavoi zezeh. The people who live in the same mavoi can force one another, not to establish between them, not to set up between them, either a tailor, velo bursaki, which is a tanner, I think, yeah, velo melami tanokus, and neither a teacher of children, melami tanokus. Now, velo echam minei bali umnius, and neither one of the anyone else, any other bali umnius, anyone else who's one another trade or profession. Now, clearly. We have to understand what's going on here. Rashi, if you go straight to Rashi, Rashi is about halfway down the Omen. You can prevent one of your neighbors renting out a house to someone from elsewhere, setting up one of these trades in the courtyard, in a case where there is already someone practicing that trade in this street. So it really qualifies, changes quite a bit what the ostensibly what the Gemora saying, right? You can't object to someone setting up these trades or professions inside your street. What you can do is if one person one of your neighbors wants to rent out his house to someone else to set up, let's say, a tailor, when there is already an existing functioning tailor in the street from a member of the Mavoi, you can stop him doing that. But if it's someone who lives in the Mavoi already, Rashi says Hadar b'Mavoi kamos, someone who actually lives as a resident of the street, he cannot prevent him getting into that business, getting into that trade. So in other words, if someone who is a resident of the street wants to engage in that trade, then he can't stop him.
So is there a difference between these cases of mavoi businesses and high street businesses? So chanot and mechanot and merchot and merchot. Is there a fundamental difference in halacha
between a mavoi and a high street?
Yeah, between setting up something in your chutzner as a business as opposed to going down and renting a retail unit.
It's a really interesting question because I think a lot of it would depend on what the mobility of people was like then. Do you know what I mean? Like, was it the question of there couldn't be that many people living in a mavoi, but then again, maybe there was. I mean, we all got in our minds, the classic Eruvin diagram, where you've got your straightforward mavoi and you've got a chutzner on one side, a chutzner on the other side. Each of them have two batim. That's all the little pictures. But of course, it could have been much more, probably was often much more complicated than that. You could have had one chutzner where there's one house. You could have one chutzner where there's 10 houses. I mean, it could be also. But the question is, how many mavois would go from one to the other? That's not so clear. It's not so clear. I think the simple pshat would seem to be that it would be the svara would be transferable to a high street, right? But what's the difference with the fact that you're renting the unit? I mean, okay, let's put it this. How do you understand why is it the Tanna Kama clearly is not like Rav Huna? You with me? Yeah, clearly. You can't prevent your neighbor setting up the same trade as you are doing. Simple as that, right? Or someone else is doing, whatever, right? What's the svara? Why? Why can't you? Because logically we understood Rav Huna, right? We said, what do you mean? You're stopping I'm here first. I've got my business selling flour. Why can you stop it? So how do you understand the other opposite to opposing view? This is the written. What would you say the svara is?
I have just as much right as you do to engage.
Why? Yeah, because I live here. Which is why your question, Martin, was the right question. Yeah. The only way you can understand it really, right, is that if you prevent me doing the business, I'm a tailor. I've learned this trade. That's what I do. That's all I know what to do. I'm a tanner. I learned how to tan, skins and make clothes. That's what I know how to do. I don't know anything else. If you stop me operating just because you've got, it's not fair. It's not fair.
You're not distinguishing between a retail presence and a work from home presence.
Again, I think it was a bit muddled up in those days. I don't think it was such a neat definition. Well, yeah, working from home. Yeah. Yeah.
A chotzer versus a street, there's no difference.
I'm saying like this: if the logic is, if the svara is to be cholik, if the svara to be cholik on Rav Huna, the svara of the Rabbanon, the Tanakama here, is the shchena and kafeu, because he can turn and say, by stopping me trade, you're throwing me out of town. Then that logic should apply whether or not it's in a movui in my house or whether I'm renting a rental unit, right? If I've got a business that's involved in a certain trade, and it might be that it's not, it might be that our town doesn't need a library of two, it's not fair on them, you know, two bakers on the same street. But that's my job, that's my business. What am I supposed to do? I live here. What do you want me to do? Go and set up a kosher baker in Hadley Wood? Well, you said Halavai when I lived there. I mean, it would have been a nace, right? There was no trade, there was no demand, right? You can go, people who wanted it went elsewhere. That wasn't enough people. So that's why you're setting up in Hendon, yeah? So that's how it is. So that's how it is. We'll finish the price. We'll come back to in a second. Shungulil is like Rav Huna. Yeah, Rashi says Rav Huna is like Rav Huna because he says even for his neighbor, he's able to force him. He's able to force him. Okay, so that's the machlokas Tanoim. He can stop. In other words, he can stop his neighbor setting up shop as well. Why? Because of Rav Huna's svara, right? You're taking away my trade. This is what I do. I'm here already. I'm going to stop you embarking on the same profession, even though that means you might lose out. So this is machlokas Tanoim.
It was an annoyance of people coming to the house to buy stuff, and that was the reason to stop the period.
Yes.
But these are two separate.
Yeah.
So what did we say? We said, yeah. So that's right. So we said in the Mishnah, that was the original Mishnah, right? On Chof Amud Beis. That's what you're referring to. Yeah, the bottom of Chof Amud Beis, right? That you can object to someone who sets up a shechana shebechotzner. You can say, I can't sleep because of the noise of everyone going in and out, right? So here we're saying that he can't stop his neighbor. So what's the difference? Maybe because there's one already. Let's take a second. Didn't we ask this question? 1 second. Where was this? 1 second. Where was this? Didn't we? I think we didn't. We didn't. Where did we? We answered this somewhere. I think. Maybe not. I mean, either way, it seems to be that there's someone here anyway. There's already a shop here, right?
Yeah.
That's that seems to be the case, right?
Article saying this, you can prevent your neighbor from setting up the same businesses. From renting it out
you can't.
to somebody else, the same business that you already.
That's right. You can't prevent. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, Tosfos deals with this a little bit. I can just see this Tosfos, the third last Tosfos must call Kofin. Tosfos says, we're talking about. He talks about the Melamed Tanokas. He says he's talking about a non-Jewish teacher. This is going on to the whole issue of again. Yeah, because they can prevent, and he says they can't. Everyone agrees you can. Yeah. Okay, it doesn't seem to deal directly with this point. Either way, I think it seems to be that here we're talking about a situation where there's already these businesses are going on. So it's not an issue here of the noise and everything else, right? It's not you can't object to the noise in this case. The question is simply whether you're taking away his trade. That's the issue. So the Ritvaim in Kiddushin, he's talking about he's going on the sugya there. The Ritva is a longer piece in Kiddushin which talks about the case of Oni HaMahapech B'Charora, which is basically where you have an Oni and he's trying to get hold of something. He's already set his sight on something and you take it away from him, and even though he hasn't actually claimed it yet. Right, Charora is like a cake or something. He's basically there's a poor Nebuch and he's getting something and he hasn't taken ownership. If you take it away from him, the Gemara says Nikra Rosha. Someone else comes along and takes away his, sort of cups just before he gets it. He's going to get it, right? He wants to get it. That's called a Rosha. So it's incorrect behavior. It's the wrong way to behave, even if technically it's not Gazela because he hasn't taken ownership. And he discusses there various other cases that are similar. And he brings the case of the Matsudas Hadog, where he says again, that after they've been captured, obviously they're in his reshus, He says, it's interesting. He actually learns pshat in the case of the fish, that what he means Yavi Siara. We saw Rashi really means that they're accustomed to go to a certain place where they've seen food. He seems to say that the scenario is that basically by putting a bait somewhere else, they're going to jump out somehow of the net or the trap and go to the other one. So you've really taken, the other guy really has taken ownership of it. Okay. But otherwise it wouldn't be a problem because it's Hefka. And then he talks about our case, and he says like this: the case of the mills, the whatever, the millstone, the case of the flour of Huna's case. As the Tanakama says here, if he belongs to a different Mavui, he can stop him. Because that's like business. Why are you coming along and setting up your tailor shop in my street where I have cornered the market here? It's not fair. But if he's a neighbor in a cafe, we can't object. Since he's living in this alleyway, the Ritva says, it's not so easy for me to do business elsewhere. This is where I live. I live in this area. It was all small trade in those days, presumably. So I want to get the business here where I live. And he's therefore going to lose out. He's therefore going to lose out. And then he has a Vahovika Hefka. It's like Hefka. I'm not sure exactly that means it's a Hovika Hefka. It's I think it means that the trade itself, no one's got ownership of that trade. The business itself, the trade itself, right? Is like Hefka. So therefore he can object and say it's not fair. It's not fair. Yeah. So that's the svara of that's the two tzodim here. Now we come on to the opinion of Rav Huna bar Rav Yeshua. And as we'll see, Tosfos takes it out clearly that the halacha is like Rav Huna bar Rav Yeshua. The starting point you need to know about Rav Huna bar Rav Yeshua is that he passes like the Rabban, so not like Rav Huna. So the principal starting point is that he holds like the Rabban, which means you can't stop your neighbor. Someone else on your street wants to set up the same trade as you, nothing you can do about it. The shaila Rav Huna bar Rav Yeshua has is, what is called a neighbor? How far does that go? Someone, if you live in one town and someone else comes from a different town, right? Okay, so you live in London and someone in Milton Keynes wants to set up, you discover some new, business, let's say, a clever way of printing things quickly or something like that. And someone from Milton Keynes goes, I'd like to do the same thing. And he comes along to London because he thinks he'll get more trade in London rather than Milton Keynes. And he wants to set up the same business here. You can object to him. You can object, but there's one exception. And this is the Amazon Shaila. If he pays taxes in this town, if he pays taxes in London, he can't object. Okay, I'm simplifying a little bit, but kraga is basically like a localized poll tax. There's like a local ruler. So he's paying. There's a tax. Everyone has a head tax. Master Rashi says maskul galtud. Well, it's the skull. It's a poll tax, right? Everyone in the city pays a certain tax to the local landlord, local ruler, whatever, right? So if this bloke, he might live 100 miles away, but if he pays tax in the city, he's like a resident for these purposes. You can't object. Yeah, makes sense?
Yeah, we had this Megillah a few days ago about people go collecting in another town and they were asked to pay
taxes.
Right.
Did we about what? You had to pay taxes.
Give it back. Give it back. Yeah, give it back at the end.
Oh yes, of course, that's right. And they get to give it back. Yes, that's right. Yes, right. We did have it. Yes, they get to give it back when they have to. But that was the other way around, right? No, or they wanted to claim it.
And they left the town.
Yeah, they have to pay it while they're there. They claim it back before they leave, so they can give it to who they want to back in their own town. Wasn't that it? Yeah. They were collecting stock in that town. If they give it there, otherwise Marasai, everyone says you have to give, everyone has to give. Right. Yeah. That's right. Anyway, so here, that was about the other end. That was the payment of the tax. He was saying if they do pay the taxes, then he can't, then it's as if he's a resident of the town. But and he's also got, so that's one case that's obvious. Okay, if you're from a different town you can object him coming to your town unless he actually pays tax there as well. It's also obvious to me, says Rav Huna bar Yeshua, that bar muvua a bar muvua denafshei lo motzi makiv, that one person, one movui, who can't object to someone else in the same movui. In other words, like the Rabbanon, right? He clearly holds that Rabbanon. No question to me. You cannot stop someone in the same movui, the same alleyway as you, from trading what he wants to do. Rav Huna bar Yeshua Shaila was like this: bar muvua achrin. Can one resident of one movui stop another movui trading or not? So in other words, so can he stop him trading? Now the question is, where is he trading? I think he's trading in his own one.
It does say entering his movui.
Yeah, he's coming into his own movui. So in other words, you have someone who you live in one street, and the guy in the next door street wants to come and set up his shop in your street. He wants to be in Brent Street. He doesn't want to set up in Bell Lane because he doesn't think he's going to get enough people in Bell Lane. So he wants to come into Brent Street, for example, assuming that we can make those comparisons, right? And that is taken. That says that's left unresolved. That's left as taken. So let's see Rashi on that. Rashi says, Motzi la'akev, melasas kanam nusu. We can prevent them doing their trade, lahavi kan limkar, and to bring it to sell. Even according to the Rabbanon who say you can't stop your neighbor, but you can prevent someone in a different city. But if he is, if the tax here he pays, he pays the tax, the poll tax to the rule of the city, then he's like a resident. The person who lives in that city can't stop him. Can't prevent, he's entitled to anywhere in the city, it seems. Yeah, it's a bit problematic that though, isn't it? See, he says he can't prevent him kol air. So what does that mean? He's got more rights than the guy who lives on the next street? Rashi says, lo motzi bar masola akiv alov kol ha'ir. He can't stop him. He can't prevent him operating the whole city. No. So what it means is like this. He can't say the whole city is out of bounds to you. If he pays tax in this city, then he can't prevent him setting up in this city. Now, what he maybe can do is prevent him setting up in his street. That's why Rashi says kol ha'ir. You're not allowed to prevent someone, banning someone from an entire city, even if they live in a different city, if they pay tax in this city. But presumably you might be able to object them setting up in your particular street. That might depend on the shaila about, whether you can object to someone in a different movui or not, right? That might be the same question. He says also, Rashi carries on, you can't stop someone who's in your street. Me, however, I'm reading it, sorry, with the changes the Bach makes. What about one movui and another movui? Then movui can someone who's in this movui, can he stop him or not? Is he like his neighbor and therefore he can't force him to stop? The neighbor that the Rabbanon were talking about was the bar muvua dahu movui. They were talking about a resident, someone who lives in that movui of this street. Someone who's in a different movui, that's not your neighbor. Now, even though it might technically be your neighbor because it's in a neighboring street, that's not called a shochin. And that he leaves unresolved. That the Gemora leaves unresolved. There are two small Tosfos here that just spell this out. Pshitali, the last two Tosfos. Can you see the last two where it says Pshitali? He says it's obvious to me one town can prevent another one. Rav Huna bar Yeshua Rabbanon Tzirele. Rav Huna bar Yeshua is going like the Rabbanon. That's the starting point. That you cannot stop someone who's your neighbor in your street. Can you stop someone in a different street? Can you stop someone in a different street? Is that what we mean when we talk about a shochin, a neighbor? That's the shaila. The Kavosei Kamalani says we hold like him, the Gabi Rav Huna, the Basrahu, because he's Basra, he lived later, he's the later authority, and therefore Rav Huna bar Yeshua, the halacha is like in respect and not like Rav Huna. And what does it mean? Pirush says Toshus b'nei ha'ir. The whole city can't object. This answers the question I mentioned before. But the people in that street can object, right? Can object. That not to enter into their street. Yeah. So in other words, he wants to set up shop in a neutral part of the city, for example, presumably that, if that exists, then he's allowed to do so. They can't ban it from the whole city. But what they can do is they can stop him coming into their own city. Yeah, their own city.
Very much rather point to say.
Yeah. When you see the point of
my house,
yes,
and not selling them from my house, so it's
yes,
taking them to the marketplace.
yes. Presumably not, but we'll come on to the marketplace in the next summit, because the marketplace creates other complications. Because the marketplace, you're going to have people there who are from outside potentially the city as well. If it's market day, that's the Sugis and Megillah. What? Exactly. So that's the question. That's the question, right? A peddler wants to come from out of town. Now we're going to deal with that on the next summit. Yeah. Here we're talking about localized trade. Yeah. So this is it's a very, very long sif. It's a very long sif here in Sif Hey and Shulchan where he deals with this, what the halacha is. And he basically says, we won't be able to go through all of it, but just to read a little bit. The Shulchan says, they can stop, they can force you setting up all of these type of the tradesmen. If there was already in the Movui someone doing that trade and they didn't object. So these things are already existing in the streets. Someone comes along, sets up a bathhouse directly opposite, like the baking shop. You cannot object. You are stopping my trade. Even if he's from another street, they can't. He says that even if it's from another Movui, you're not allowed to object. Because they already have that trade operating there. In other words, if there was no trade operating there at all, so then we learn you can stop it because you can save the noise. That was the Mishnah, right? You can stop them because of the noise. But if already that's operational, someone else wants to also set it up, you can't stop him. You can't stop him. Yeah. And then he goes on to talk about the other cases that we'll come to about someone coming from a different, well, because we'll come from a different city. Yeah, but you see, either way, I mean, there's a very, very long more here, where he just presumably goes into great detail about this. They can object. It's interesting. The Beis Yosef brings a lot of poskim. The Ramah says that the many hold Rabbi Moimrim the bnei achotzer mavui she'enim mefulash. The people in the chotzer or the mavui which is not mefulash. Other people can object even in that case, presumably because they're going to create a lot more noise with an extra guy, right, running a business. It's just the objection to preventing my trade can't be made on a neighbor. I mean, there's a lot more to it. We don't have time to go into it now, but there's a lot more to it. But you see from this that, a lot that there, our natural and simplistic response to someone setting up opposite someone else's, do that, take away the trade. It's not so simple. It's really not so simple as to whether it's allowed or not. I mean, again, whether it's comparable is not so clear in terms of the in terms of the shop. Although you could make the argument that it's even more reason to allow it because you have people coming from all over the place, right? It's not limited to that particular model, right?
Does a kashrus licensing authority have responsibilities to its licensees
To what?
to prevent
Master Gavul. The licensing authorities tread a very, very fine line in terms of from what I understand, they tread a very fine line. Avrami is really the expert, much more than me on this. They tread a very fine line on things that are non-kashrus related. Isn't that right? It's all sorts of areas. Can you play what the music is inappropriate, or the decor in the shop is not right, or all this type of stuff. That there are lots of questions that arise, and people assume that the licensing authorities have got jurisdiction over all sorts of things. But it's not. Am I wrong? It's not right. Yeah, they really got responsibility for kashrus.
There's a new diner that's opening up in Edgware.
Yes, you told me about this.
The wife of the owner sat through over 100 hours of music to ensure that only male voices were selected. Okay, nothing to do with kashrus, but yeah, we all got to know about it, and it's one of the things that was publicized. But at the end of the day,
was that that wasn't a requirement?
Not at all. Not at all. The only thing that is required for kashrus is to make sure that whatever goes into that shop is.
We were putting their mouths.
Yeah, that's it.
What's the name of the restaurant?
I'll tell you after.
No, but it's a really interesting question. Jeremy's point that relates to Jeremy's point. I mean, this is like, but also the other thing is like there is a thing here as well, which is this comes back to, unfortunately, and the point has been made many times in the past. People often say the Rabbonim should do something, like as if there's this kind of global Rabbonim who all work together and united on issues of concern to the community. Sometimes that works, occasionally, right? But very often it doesn't. There's no central authority. Who's to stop someone opening up across the road? Like, we don't have. It's a free market, right? You can't necessarily object. But what we see here is, it's not necessarily a right to object if he lives there and wants to set up that trade. He claims there's enough. The question would be if you could prove that there's not enough. But again, according to what we're learning here, and certainly in a Movri situation, even if it's definitely going to take away trade from me, you're as entitled as I am to set up this trade, to set up this business. That's what it seems to me.
So there are very few barriers to trade, only noise pollution.
Seems to be, doesn't it? Yeah.
More important is
Yeah. But there are barriers. For example, if you come from a different city, that's clear. The next bit of the Shulchan Aruch is Aval Medina, a ger, a stranger, Medina Acher. It's not here. It's not ger as in get, right? Someone else comes from outside the city. They can stop. Unless he pays the tax as well, whatever. So there are some boundaries. Yeah, and nowadays that's not going to be relevant, you think. The Ramah says the Rabbi Moimrim Dafilochi Ein Rishus Likonis Movish Yisham Bnei Nusay. There are many who say that even if he pays the tax, he can't come into that same street that the guy is already in with that trade. Yeah. It's really interesting. I don't think that you have to know exactly how this plays out in terms of nowadays. Because for example, the Ramah also says that the Bnei Ho'er, the city as a whole, can say if the whole city say, you want to create. I mean, this is really relevant. This happens all the time. Planning, zoning law, planning laws, whatever. Someone comes along and says, I want to set up a major factory inside this little village or town, so they can get together and say, no, we are objecting because we won't be able to sleep because of the noise or whatever, or people was going to create too much traffic in the town and all this type of thing. Even if they've got that trade already. Yeah. And then there's a whole question about whether or not what if he comes along and says, okay, I'll agree to pay the tax. Does that allow him now to set up? You can imagine this goes into lots of different directions. Yeah. Let's carry on. Omar Rav Huna, Omar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef, he qualifies Rav Huna's shitta. Rav Yosef is a Moedi Rav Huna. Rav Huna said that one movui can stop in one movui you can stop if you own the mill. yeah, the mill, you can stop someone else setting up a mill. That was Rav Huna. You can stop. But he agrees, he holds up Shimon Gamliel. That if he's teaching children, you can't object. You can't object. If someone else wants to set up a school, you can't object. Omar, the Bach, I think leaves out, the brackets. Rashi, it's clear that it's from Rashi. They didn't have the skirsa. To Omar, top of the next one, Kinas Sofrim Tarba Chochma. Go straight and leave out the brackets. Kinas Sofrim Tarba Chochma. Kinas Sofrim Tarba Chochma. If he wants to set up a school, then it's only everyone's going to gain. Why is everyone going to gain? Because Kinas Sofrim is where you have jealousy between scholars. It's a positive thing. It's make them all learn better. So that increases wisdom. If you look at the last Rashi in the Amud, he holds up Rishon Gamliel, teaching children because he can't stop someone else in the street also teaching children. They're going to be careful about their trade, their profession. Not profession, they're teaching what they do. They're going to be afraid of each other. It has a halachic ramifications. So there you are. So this means, this means that it's got special significance when it comes to teaching children, just like we saw before. It's also brought down here as well. Okay, fine. Top of the next one. We said that we pass like Rav Huna Beit Rav Yeshua, and Rav Nachman Yitzchak qualifies his opinion, and he says that Rav Huna Beit Rav Yeshua agrees. If you have peddlers who go around in the cities, this is coming onto the marketplace question, Eli, your question, right? You have they go around and they sell things in different cities. He cannot object to them. So Rav Huna Beit Rav Yeshua, if you remember, said that someone in the same street, you cannot object if your neighbor wants to do it. Someone in a different wavui is a shaila, teku. Someone who is in a different town, you can object. However, not if he's a roichel whose job is a peddler, goes around different cities. Domomar, because we learned in this is one of the list in Bava Kama. The Bava Kama, if you remember the end of Merubah, there's a long list of takonos. Ezra was masak in various things. Ezra took in Israel, one of those takonos was that peddlers should go around the cities. So there should be adornments and perfumes and things like that should be commonly found for Jewish women. And therefore, that was one of the takonas, but that's only to go around, to circulate, to go around to different mavuis and not to stay there, but just to, pop in with the stuff that he wants to sell, but then go home. But to set up shop permanently, he's not allowed to. The tzuvah me'rabbanan, but if he's a Talmid Chacham or an aspiring one, tzuvah me'rabbanan is generally kind of a reference to younger Talmidei Chacham. So if you like learning to be, if you like, I feel like it's a funny phrase. Everyone's like to be, but that's generally the term. That's what it means. I feel like Kfui Nami, even if he's a Kfui Nami, even if he's even to fix there, even to stay permanently, they're allowed to. Rava Sharlu, Rabbi Yashia, Rav Ovadia, Rava permitted Rabbi Yashia and Rav Ovadia la'akvui deloy kehilchasa, to fix a shop there, deloy kehilchasa, even though it was against the strict letter of the law. My time was the reason. Because since they are Rabbanon, that's their job, they're trying to learn, they will not be able to learn properly if they're not able to also do some business on the side.
Not sure I understand that one.
Yes.
That's the other way around.
What?
If they're with the Rabbanon, then they'll have a cart because they don't have time to actually manage the shop.
No, but if they because if you make them leave, they don't go around. They have no time to go around, and therefore they come to learn. Basically, they come to learn to a certain city. You come to Nahardol or Surah, one of the great centers of learning in Bovel. If you make them, if you say they're not allowed to sell, and they I don't know, they on the side they drew they cornered the market in selling candles, for example, right? If you make them go around with a wagon selling candles from street to street, they're never going to have time to learn. So therefore, they are exempted from the restriction on trade which applies to people from outside the city. There's a general restriction on trading from outside the city, saying that you're allowed to go around as a peddler, but you're not allowed to actually set up a shop. There is an exemption for Talmidei Chachamim, because if they weren't allowed to do so, then they wouldn't be able to learn. The concept of their choice to learn. Yes, but the point is, well, no, what you are, yes, that's true. What was that?
I want to make up our else.
Yeah, but you're saying that you're saying it's one rule for us and one rule.
So that's your problem, really. Your real problem is it seems like favoritism. Now, there's two issues here. Number one, no. So that's right. That's favoritism. Yeah, one rule for one rule. There's two issues here. Number one is, we'll come back to favoritism in a second. One question is well, not question, the observation, which is something which we've actually encountered before. I showed you a Rosh in Perek HaShutfin, which is fascinating, which talks about the concept of Toras Nusa. What do you define someone whose trade is his learning? That's a phrase which has entered the lexicon in Israel. Toras Nusa is like a formal phrase in Israel, which is defined as someone whose life is learning, and therefore they have various rules, which are not necessarily that generous, but there are various rules and regulations that apply to them, right? They claim an exemption for whatever it is, based on the different rules of the time. That's called Toras Nusa. The Rosh says someone who devotes all their spare time to learning, and just earns enough money in order to live on, that's considered to be Toras Nusa. So the first thing you've got to get your head around is the fact that it seems quite clear from this Gemora and other places as well, that a person could be considered in full-time learning, certainly in those days, and they were still earning a living. It's just that that was how they paid their way. They had to pay their way in order to learn. Right? That's one thing. So that's what's going on. So then that also helps answer a little bit the favoritism question, because the question is, there is a societal need to facilitate that. Because if society doesn't facilitate that structure and system, you won't have anyone there. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's not favoritism in the sense that the learning is considered to be of, primacy clearly to the kehillah, to the society, to the town, right? So they have an achrayus to facilitate that. How are you going to facilitate that? You're going to give them an exemption in certain ways to the general rules that apply, which enables them to learn. So these guys might have come, these Talmidei Chachamim might have come, they've got a business, because you're allowing them to set up shop for the month or so that they're here, rather than making them go around through the cities. It gives them, let's say, 7 hours a day to learn. Otherwise, they'd only have 2 hours a day to learn. Favoritism? You still have your Novak Djokovic problem, right?
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know.
No, I'm saying they're there for the whole year round.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Well, it doesn't.
It stops the community and support
as well. Yes. Exactly.
They're not
They're working some of the time. They're working some of the time. We're not passing. Gotta raise that from the record. This one, it's like hand size, So just, Look, okay. I mean, can you see? Okay, let's see Rashi first, then I'll show you Ben Gersh. 1 second. Let's see Rashi. Even though he says that one member of the town can stop another member of the town, to bring here and to sell. I'm at the second line of Rashi, on the top of the Omen. He agrees with peddlers who sell spices and or whatever, or perfume, whatever. For women to use as perfume. People who are the peddlers in the city, because there will be local peddlers as well, they can't stop them, because that was a Tchonas Ezra. They should be available. Now, the next one was La'ahaduri. We said, La'ahaduri. To go around in the city, go around to the different alleyways, to the houses everyone wants to buy, and then they go home. If he's busy learning and it's not the derech for him to go around to start, kind of every different house and knocking on doors, and he allowed him to do that. The Gemara specifically says, the example given in the Gemara was that Rava allowed Rabbi Yashia and Rav Uvadia to do that. He did it. Rashi says, "Lifnim mishuras hadin." The halacha, they shouldn't have been allowed to do it, but he allowed them to lifnim mishuras hadin, beyond the strict letter of the law. Okay, so now look at Rabbeinu Gershom. Can you see on the very outermost column, the tiny print? Yeah, you see Rabbeinu Gershom? So Rabbeinu Gershom says, it's the second one. Vahani Mili. No, not that one. Yeah, Deloke Hilchasa. Can you see where it says Deloke Hilchasa? It's very small, yeah? Kloma, Shalo Yilmadu Mimenu Acherim. Halacha Delfnim Mishur Din Avad Behu. Mishum Derabonon Nidu. In other words, other people should not learn from them this halacha, because it was Lefnim Mishur Sadeh Avad Lehu. It's like the Gemara is emphasizing don't learn from here for other cases, because this was specific to them. It would prevent them learning if you stopped them doing this. If you made them go around and knock on doors, they wouldn't have any time to learn. So it seems to be that it's a communal responsibility to support them in this way. You have no, Jeremy doesn't. I mean, why you find that so difficult? Really difficult. I mean, there's a still think Jeremy still thinks it's favoritism.
No, I'm just thinking about the chap who's eking out a living selling candles.
Yeah.
These two young
guys wearing hats. Yeah. Guys wearing hats.
Flying out.
Yeah, they show up.
They learn a couple of hours Gemora, and they're taking this business.
Yeah. I don't think. Well, that's the responsibility on them. What's also interesting. What's interesting from here is that if you look at historically, in Eastern Europe, for example, I think even until the war, there was the minhag was, for example, that it was much more common than nowadays that the community would facilitate trades, for example, for the Klei Kodesh. Certainly for the Rabbonim, for example, if a Rav would often get as part of the contract, like it would be kind of factored into a salary where they would, let's say, his wife would sell certain items in the city, and she would have complete jurisdiction. She would either formally open a shop, or it was kind of like built into it. It's like a company car, She'll sell all the candles that people need for Shabbos, for example, and no one else in the shtetl was allowed to sell the candles. So it's interesting. It wasn't considered to be unusual. Like Chaim's wife, I think, famously had a shop. This is a similar thing. He was the Rav of the town. I think she had a shop. I think so. What was that? Was it herrings? Right, there you are, herring. Yeah. So there you are. So that was interesting because that's also a similar sort of idea. Right, the Gemara brings a couple of stories to support these halachas. Yeah, people who were basically selling baskets. Some say they were selling cauldrons. It's a bit, or pots, but either baskets or pots. They brought their baskets to Bovel. The people in the town were objecting to them. Bovel here, I don't think refers to a country. It's a city, right? I think Bovel's got a specific meaning here. Anyway, either way, people objected to them. Also coming to Ravina, they came in front of Ravina and he said to me, Alma Osu, or Alma Lizavnu. What's the problem? They come here on market day. They come in the Yom HaShuk. So what's your objection? They've come from elsewhere and they're going to sell to people who come from elsewhere. The Gemara beginning of Megillah, right? The Yom HaShuk, everyone comes from all over the place. So if everyone comes from all over the place, people can sell as well from all over the place. You're buying and selling. That's what it is. It's an open market. The Gemara says only on the Yom HaShuk, on the day of the market. When it's not the market day, they cannot. And even on the day of the market day, the heter was only lizvunei b'shukah, to sell in the marketplace. But not to go around and sell in the town. In this case, they were only allowed to sell in the shuk itself. They were only allowed to go. So remember, with the peddlers, that was based on Takonos Ezra. Takonos Ezra was to enable peddlers to sell basomim all over, and therefore they were allowed to go around from house to house, as long as they didn't set up a shop to sell a perfume, right? But that was an exception. Normal tradespeople were only allowed to go from one town to another on the Yom HaShuk, and they were only allowed to sell in the shuk. Make sense? So you see clearly there was a difference between the marketplace, which is probably what if our streets, high streets are really like a marketplace. No, because they constantly have people from all over coming and people selling to all over. right? There seems to be a clear difference between the way the Mavui would operate and the way the high street would operate. This high street is like a shuk, I would think.
It used to be like the little makolets
Yes, yes, that's right. There's one makolet. That's right. That's right. There's one makolet. It's interesting that.
But if you're going to say that, then the rules can't apply that.
What?
If you're going to differentiate between the courtyard, the high street, and backyard.
Yeah.
In the previous discussion we had, we were talking about setting up shop.
Yes.
Depending on the high.
Yeah, it may not be different. Precisely. I'm not sure. That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure. You have to see whether that. I can see the logic. I can see the logic that a high street nowadays is more like the shuk. It's more like the shuk. Yeah. Now, Hanu Amuroy, the Isu Amra, the next story, Hanu Amuroy, the Isu Amra from Nara. There are people who sold wool, and they brought Amra from Nara, a place called Pum Nara. Also, but in Masa, the same thing. People in the town made a big fuss. They said, we don't want these people here selling. Also, the coming of Kana, they came in front of Rav Kana. He said to them, Dinu Demaku. It's correct that they're objecting to you. Because why what's your business selling? Why you can't sell here? You can't sell it. Presumably it wasn't a marketplace, market day, whatever. Amalu said to him, no, well, we have a reason we have to, because Islan Ashroi B'masa. We have credit in this town. So we've got to claim our debts. We gave credit to people in this town. So we've got to stay here for a couple of days or a week to claim that credit. And if we don't sell anything whilst we're here, we'll lose business. We won't have anything to live on. You understand their claim? So we want to be able to sell whilst we're here. We have to be here, so we should be able to sell whilst we're here. We said to them, very simply, passing to them, no problem. You're allowed to sell however much you need to live on whilst you're here, and however long it takes you to claim the credit. As soon as you've got your money back that you're owed, you've got to leave. Simple, right? That was his psak. You're allowed to sell because it's a reasonable request to what you need to live on. So let's see Rashi. Rashi's Dikuloi about 6 lines after it gets narrow. Dikuloi the Salim that you sell baskets, some say selling pots. Ramal is on Lizavlon. Yom the Shuk it was market day. Many people come from elsewhere to buy from the marketplace. They can't object also to the sellers to bring their trade on that day and to sell to those who gather there. Amiroy is Mochrei Tzemer, those who sell wool. Islan Ashroi B'masa. These places, I mean, again, as I said, again, this is still recently, even in Eastern Europe as well. These towns would come alive on market. You can't imagine these dead places where there was hardly anyone there. All of a sudden, the Yom HaShuk was like, it was massive. The whole place would come alive. Everyone came. All the people were living in all these villages, like you see in like Gemora and Megillah. They were living all the farms all around. Once a week or whatever, maybe twice a week, Monday, Thursday, they would come, and then the place would just take off. And that was when everyone would do everything there. You take something to Din Torah. That's Mikra Megillah. Yeah, everything happened then. The rest of the time, it was like a ghost town. There was nothing going on, right? Amaroi Mochrei Tzemer, those who sell wool. Those are all Islan Ashroi Masa B'charna B'amona. We sold on credit, but Shich Honor L'Shos Kan or on trust. Shich Honor L'Shos Kan. We have to wait out Shnik L'Chav. We claim our debts. And Einon and we don't sell our merchandise. How are we going to sustain ourselves? You're allowed to stay until you can get your debts back from those who bought from you on credit. So yes.
Are they saying that they came to collect debt from their previous debt? They're not.
What do you mean?
That they sold on credit.
Yeah, previously
on another visit.
Presumably, yes.
Come again.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Constant cycle of debt.
Presumably, yeah. And if they can't, well, or whatever reason, they'd had a situation where they had to do that. People didn't have money or whatever. They sold on credit. We'll never be able to claim our debts because we don't have anything to live on whilst we're here. People were very much hand to mouth, right? There wasn't like if you don't let us do trade while we're here, we'll never be able to get it back. Yeah. So we'll leave it there. The next is a very interesting story. Till the mission is a story about Rav Dimi and Hadar and how this played out and the connections of this sugya. So Hashem will continue next week. Have a good evening.